I am Dracula.
Bela Lugosi. He's remembered around the world as the dashing and deadly Count Dracula, the vampire who never dies. But this role of a lifetime turned out to be both a blessing and a curse. As Dracula, Bela Lugosi became eternally famous. Tragically, his monstrous success would ultimately doom him. On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll unearth the sad, secret life of the man behind the cape.
People were shocked, and oh my goodness, look what happened to Bela Lugosi.
We'll learn of the deadly addiction that haunted this master of the macabre from an actor who portrayed him.
A lot of landmines here could have been terrible. And now a morphine addict and alcohol. I mean, there's such stuff here.
And the experts who've studied him.
The press just had to feel the Dracula discovered to be drug fiend.
We'll also examine Lugosi's turbulent career and private hell.
Imagine the despair. Imagine the horror.
The tormented life of Bela Lugosi will be explored through historical footage.
I don't say I don't like people at all, but to tell you the truth, I only like them if I have a chance to look deep into their heart.
And never-before-seen film clips.
A person could get killed that way.
As well as heart-wrenching photographs and stirring reenactments. I'm AJ Benza. Join me as we exorcise the demons of horror film legend Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi was born Bela Blasko on October 20th, 1882 in Lugos, Hungary, just 50 miles from Transylvania, where the Dracula legend is based. Curator of the Hollywood Wax Museum, Jonathan Morrill, explains how Bela's home life was shattered in 1894.
When Bela Lugosi was 12 years old, his father died. He walked 300 miles away from his hometown, Lugos, Hungary, to Romania, where he got work as an apprentice in a coal and mining company.
By the age of 18, Bela returned to Hungary with dreams of becoming an actor. He learned to channel the suffering of his youth into characters he portrayed on stage. David Durston was a longtime family friend.
Bela Lugosi had been a matinee idol in Europe. He did Romeo and Juliet. He even did Jesus Christ. So he was very versatile, but he was also very romantic. Leading man.
Though his acting career seemed promising, 33-year-old Bela bowed out of the theater in 1914 to enlist in the Army. Lugosi's war efforts are recalled by Cult magazine creator Buddy Barnett.
He was in World War I and he was injured, and he had a really severe back problem that came back years later.
To ease the pain of that back injury, Lugosi started taking prescription drugs, a practice that would eventually prove his undoing. After his discharge, Bela not only returned to the theater in Hungary, but also formed an actors' union. As he later discussed in a 1932 interview, Bela ended up in political hot water.
Why did you leave Hungary?
Political reasons. After the war, I participated in the revolution, and later, I found myself on the wrong side.
Gary Don Rhodes is the author of the biography, Bela Lugosi.
He was forced to leave. He would have faced imprisonment had he stayed, possibly even death. He fled for his life.
Bela Lugosi came to this country, came to America in 1921 because he was a great believer in the American dream.
It's very nice to live in a country where people know how to mind their own business.
At the age of 40, a still attractive, youthful Bela made his way to the New York stage. Lugosi's life forever changed in 1927 when he won the leading role in the Broadway production of Dracula. In every performance, Bela seemed to have the vampire in his blood. Well, so to speak.
He began as Dracula, doing it over 1,000 times on the stage.
For women who came to a matinee or evening performance of Dracula on Broadway in 1927 and 1928, this was more than a play. This was almost a sexual experience.
It was in 1930 that Hollywood filmmakers decided to make a movie out of Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula. The 49-year-old Bela, of course, was thrilled with the idea of bringing his character to the big screen.
He wanted it very, very badly in the Universal film. He realized he was the best man for the job. He campaigned for it. He helped Universal get the property from the Bram Stoker estate by writing letters on the studio's behalf, using his own influence.
Bela Lugosi was certainly not Universal Studios' first choice for the lead role in the 1931 film Dracula. They probably realized they had somebody so overly willing to play the role that they could take advantage of him. When they finally cast him, he only made $3,500 for his work on the film.
When he did Dracula, he didn't know what he was saying. He didn't understand English. He simply had to memorize lines. And I think that may have been why he spoke so strange, you know. Listen to them, children of the night, what music they make.
Lugosi may not have been the first guy with an accent to live the American dream, but when the movie Dracula came out in 1931, Bela was one of the few with fangs. B-movie actor Robert Clark remembers the film's premiere.
I was never so frightened in my whole life, nor do I think I've ever been since. I was witnessing Bela Lugosi as Dracula. It was so real. I was there in the theater, but to me it was almost as if he was really there. And perhaps we're going to reach out for my throat.
He had those hypnotic eyes that would penetrate, you know, and it would really make shivers go up your back.
When Dracula was released, women wrote Lugosi most of his fan mail, being sexually drawn to the figure of Dracula.
Here he was, this Valentino from hell, this great demonic film personality. He virtually owned the horror genre.
The film Dracula was a huge hit, and the title role earned Bela Lugosi widespread fame as the King of Fright. But for Lugosi, the horror would soon be reflected in his sordid personal life. Why was Bela cursed by his Dracula success? How did Lugosi's arrogance virtually ruin his career? And what about the drugs? When we come back, the beginning of the end for Bela Lugosi. Hollywood creature of the night, Bela Lugosi terrified audiences with his performance as the blood-sucking vampire in the 1931 hit Dracula. This role earned Lugosi international stardom. So the big shots at Universal Studios wanted to capitalize on Lugosi's horror film fame. They offered him the chance to leave the Count behind and assume the mantle of the ultimate monster.
Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Following Dracula, Lugosi turned down the role in what was to be Universal Studios' next horror film, Frankenstein.
When he was offered the part of the monster, he was insulted.
He turned it down because there was no dialogue. All it said was, "Ah!" And you can just hear Bela, "What? I don't do anything, I grunt, you know."
He refused the heavy makeup the part required, and the role went to an unknown actor named Boris Karloff.
And then, of course, Boris Karloff became a big star.
He never really made peace with missing out on Frankenstein, and there was always that attitude, I have created my own monster.
Bela's career would never be the same after turning down the part of Frankenstein in 1931. Over the next decade, Lugosi often found himself playing second fiddle to Hollywood's new favorite ghoul, Boris Karloff. Oscar-winning director Robert Wise recalls Lugosi's fall from grace.
His career was on the way down at this point. But it still had a name value, particularly the studio felt that if coupled with Karloff.
You and I should work together.
Bela made a trio of films with Boris Karloff as the co-star. They did The Invisible Ray, The Raven, and The Black Cat.
Lugosi went to other studios as he groped for any role that he could get. Universal just simply put much more of their effort into building Karloff as the major star.
Martin Landau won an Oscar in 1994 for his portrayal of Bela Lugosi in the movie Ed Wood.
Dreaming of playing romantic parts and never getting that opportunity. Having done that on Broadway prior to that, Dracula kind of limiting him and his inability to get rid of his accent.
I'm studying now American slang. I know how to say okay and cat's whiskers and baloney and how.
He had difficulties accepting his being typecast in Hollywood.
Bela also had difficulties keeping a wife.
On January 31st, 1933, Bela Lugosi married for the fourth time Lillian Arch, not quite 21 years old. Lugosi had just turned 50, and the headlines read, Dracula weds beauty.
She put up with an awful lot from Bela. because, you know, he was very artistic and sometimes temperamental, and, you know, he had these moods.
He was, as she always put it, lord and master of his household. He treated his wife almost like a servant. He would snap his fingers for coffee and snap his fingers to have a cigar. He expected this kind of treatment.
Despite his erratic behavior, Bela took great pride in his family. In 1938, when Lugosi was 56 years old, his son Bela Jr. was born.
Lillian took young Bela Jr. onto the set, thinking that Bela Jr. would be kind of horrified. But he walked on the set and he said, "Hi, Dad." It kind of hurt Bela a little bit that he wasn't that frightening even to his own son.
Lugosi became scared of turning down many other roles that were offered to him. This caused him to be associated with lower budget films, lesser scripts, lesser stories, and as a result, that eroded his career quickly.
Bela tried to electrify audiences with the 1941 film Devil Bat.
Our theory of glandular stimulation through electrical impulses was correct.
Maila Nurmi is remembered as television's cult idol vampira and knows firsthand how cruel Hollywood can be.
Hollywood is known as a town that turns its back on you when you're down, arbitrarily, and that is true. But I don't think they would have done it quite so dramatically with Bela, were it not for the fact that he was also a monster. So he was not just an unemployed actor, he was an unemployed monster.
Now, since I played Dracula, I'm the boogeyman.
Of course, he later played the Frankenstein monster. It was pretty far down the road, and he really considered it a come down at that point to have to do it. He was 60 years old. He was not in the best of health. He had to wear this incredibly heavy makeup. During the shooting, Lugosi collapsed.
Bela Lugosi's collapse was, in fact, due to his addiction to prescription drugs.
There is some debate about whether Lugosi was a full-fledged drug addict yet, but there's no debate he was desperate for a comeback. While doing B-movies, regional theater productions, and celebrity appearances, Bela relied on his Dracula persona to get the attention of the press and public.
He slept in coffins and drank blood and all that sort of baloney.
First, you're a 19th century matinee idol from Europe who is very handsome. Then you are this handsome man who is suddenly scary, as well as handsome. Then you're considered by the public simply to be scary. Then you're considered by the public to be camp. Then you're unemployed.
By 1952, Bela Lugosi had come full circle in Hollywood. From the heights of his Dracula stardom, he was now a forgotten actor. He was condemned to star in silly movies like Bela Lugosi Meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. Anyway, for the struggling 70-year-old, this could not be more humiliating. Tragically, this was not the end of scandal and heartache for Bela Lugosi. When we come back, we'll reveal the scars of a fallen Hollywood idol and share his struggle for a final comeback.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
After terrifying audiences with his acclaimed performance as Dracula in the 1931 film, hard luck and bad choices sucked the life out of the promising career of the Hungarian-born actor Bela Lugosi. Welcome back to Mysteries and Scandals. I'm A.J. Benza. The 1948 movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein was the last picture Lugosi made for a major studio. By 1952, Bela's life was on the rocks.
Lugosi was very much a drinker throughout his Hollywood career, and by the 50s that had escalated to a stage where he was an alcoholic.
I had to kind of nurse him through this few scenes he had there. I heard later, or found out later, that he might have been on drugs.
Certainly it seems that some pains that had developed, probably caused during World War I, meant that he had to find relief, and morphine and some other medicines were prescribed to him.
After 20 years of marriage, life with Bela was too much for his fourth wife, Lillian, to endure.
It finally reached the point that with Lillian becoming more and more liberated, that she simply could not take the continuing jealousy. And in 1952, I believe, she left Lugosi, and then divorce filed in 1953. She took their son, and as he put it, he said, "He was my flesh."
It's unclear whether drugs really caused problems in Lugosi's marriage to Lillian. In fact, that she helped wean him slowly from the drugs.
She wanted to leave him with him being healthy and with him not being hooked on these drugs.
The divorce, however, and the feelings of grief he had as a result of that may well have led him back to the drugs.
He's drinking heavily. He has the narcotics habit. He has no work, he has no money. He's very close to basically being not only an old actor without work, but being an old man out in the street.
Ultimately, he was just desperate enough to take whatever he could get, and that's when Ed Wood moved in.
When the 28-year-old wannabe filmmaker first met Bela in 1953, Wood saw it as a chance to cast a celebrity in his first movie.
And he needed someone that he could get for little money that had recognition.
Bela's pal, Richard Sheffield, didn't think much of Ed Wood.
His general appearance just gave me the impression of a slick wheeler and dealer.
And they needed each other, and they served each other, and out of that, this friendship.
He did the Ed Wood pictures, which were so denigrating, so wretched.
But that was nothing compared to the disgrace he was about to suffer.
On April 21st, 1955, he committed himself as a drug addict. That date was his ex-wife Lillian's 44th birthday.
This is still the 1950s, and Lugosi was really the first major star to say, hey, I have an addiction, I must get help. And it was certainly front-page news. It was certainly more publicity than he had gotten in some time.
He showed the reporters his legs with the needle marks. He told stories about how he had to eat his pajamas and how his body grew hot and cold while he would go through these dope fits. And it was a man crying out for attention.
It's a terrible ordeal to go through a withdrawal. It's the greatest pain in the world.
He did marry one final time a woman who wrote him while he was in the hospital, Hope Leininger. She signed each letter a dash of hope.
Hope, who had been writing him fan mail for 20 years, within days after leaving the hospital, he married her. Hope, when she married Bela on August 24th, 1955, was 36 years old. Bela was 72, and it was a doomed and very sad marriage.
Would this new wife drive another nail into Dracula's coffin? Poor guy, you know, at 72 years old, an actor should be raking in Lifetime Achievement Awards or maybe playing bridge at a Miami Beach country club. Sadly, that just wasn't in the cards for Bela. Coming up, what more was in store for this one-time king of Hollywood horror, and how did Bela Lugosi spend his final pathetic days? After starring in the hugely successful film Dracula, movie boogeyman Bela Lugosi endured decades of despair, scandal, and personal heartbreak. In 1955, Lugosi was released from an LA hospital after a 3-month stay to fight his addiction to morphine. Days later, the 72-year-old actor married a 36-year-old woman named Hope. What he could have used was a little faith and charity.
You feel like $1 million. You feel like Dracula really felt, huh? Sure, at his best. I'm looking forward to work again.
With no film offers coming his way, Bela and his new bride were pretty much broke. He tried in vain to stay clean and sober.
When Bela went to the AA meetings, that in his jacket he had 6 little bottles of a variety of liquors. After sweating out the AA meeting, he would treat himself to several of these bottles.
He would hide liquor in different parts of the apartment, try and keep it away from Hope, and Hope was constantly rummaging through everything to get rid of these items.
Just a few months after the wedding, the honeymoon was over.
She thought she was marrying the great Dracula figure whom she had dreamed about for over 20 years. And what she was getting instead was this very bitter and brittle old man.
In his final days, a sad 74-year-old Bela remained haunted by his demons.
He awoke in the middle of the night, and his wife Hope said, "Why do you look so upset?" And he said, "I think Boris Karloff is in the living room waiting to see me."
You'll never get rid of me.
He talked about how really terrified of death he was. The last day of Bela Lugosi's life would have been August 16th, 1956.
He died in his sleep of a heart attack.
And when Hope got home that evening, she said, he looked funny. And she got the landlord, and the landlord came in and said, "Looks good to me." She and the landlord said, "Well, before we call anyone, let's get the liquor bottles out of the room," because they didn't want him to be found that way.
Bela had always wanted to be buried in his cape. I said, "Why don't you use the entire full dress?" In death, he made his final performance, characterized as Dracula.
Famous comedian said when he heard that Bela Lugosi had died, "Don't worry, he'll be back."
In 1959, a year after his death, Bela Lugosi did come back in what's been called the worst movie ever made, Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space. This post-mortem performance is considered his last. To horror film fans and collectors of movie memorabilia, Bela's back and bigger than ever.
It's great. Suddenly he's getting really the recognition that he deserves.
Lugosi now is more popular than he possibly ever was during his career. In the collecting business, Bela Lugosi is a lot more popular than Boris Karloff.
Bela Lugosi gave us two big things in his life: dedication to his art, to his craft, and the ability of having the courage to fight on despite all the difficulties that were placed in his path.
In the last few months, I showed a photograph of Bela to an 11-year-old boy, and I asked him, "Do you know who that is?" And unhesitatingly, he said, "That's Dracula."
Bela Lugosi made 103 films, but he was, is, and always will be Dracula. His fans will forever thrill at the mention of his name, and that ain't such a bad way to spend eternity. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time our paths cross in a state of mind called Hollywood.
No. Dracula never ends. I don't know whether I shall call it a fortune or a cause, but it never ends.
Goodbye.